What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Optimize You. Matt, what the fuck is up, brother?
What's up, bro? How we doing, man?
Dude, I'm juiced to talk to you today, man. I literally, I feel like I finally have like my energy back. I finally feel good. And this like honestly over the last like month, the podcast hasn't felt the same for me just because I haven't been in a great place. But now I feel like even though it was a bright spot for me when we were recording, I was like, oh, this is a good bright spot. It feels good doing this. It was just, I didn't have the energy that I normally do. And so today I feel like I have it back and I feel so pumped to just be chatting. And also we got some good shit today. We got some good shit. We're just going to talk about really life, but I got some good talking points that I've been just thinking about. And first off, PSA, public service announcement. I've been working out like a little fucking bitch over the last 6 months, and I figured it out recently.
What's been going on?
Well, what I figured out is like, so I didn't have a gym for like 4 months over the summer. I was at my parents' place, the transition from Minnesota to Arizona. And what I realized, so I didn't have structured workouts over that time frame. Before then, when I was in the gym, I had pretty good structure. I always tracked my workouts through my notes app. But then I finally got down here, joined the gym, was still kind of working out like a bitch. But then I decided like a week ago, I was like, I'm going to create, again, structure for my workouts. And I'm going to just start working out. And I was like, right away, first workout, I was like, oh my gosh, I have been working out like a bitch. Like I have been so soft in the gym. I didn't realize it until I finally had that structure. And I kind of realized that like for me, I'll get a good workout in when I don't have structure. Like I'll go in, I'll be like, I'm going to hit a push day today or whatever. Right. Like, and I'll still get I'll get a good workout in, but I'm still picking exercises that I don't like, that I just want to do there, right? It's like you're just picking the stuff you want to do as opposed to maybe the stuff that's going to be the most beneficial is what I've kind of figured out. Is like now I have my structured days and I go in and it's like you got to do, like maybe you substitute something here and there if you like feel a tweak. Like today I kind of had a little, my back was just a little tweaked. And so I just did a few sets of RDLs as opposed to doing like a third set because I was like, I don't really feel like fucking anything up there. And so like just those little substitutions there. But I've definitely been getting like way, way better work. I almost puked twice this week. Like that's kind of crazy. Yeah. Also 15 to 20 rep range though. I decided to throw myself into the deep end with the 15 to 20 rep range. And so that back squats, barbell back squats at 15 to 20 reps.
Oh, gross. Yeah.
Literally, I left the gym after I did 3 sets of barbell back squat, like 15 to 20 reps. And then I did shoulder press. And after that, I felt like I was going to puke. And I was like, I'm not going to puke in this gym. And so I left the gym. I laid on my couch for about an hour. And then, like that was just, oh my God. But that's my public service announcement.
You weren't kidding. You threw yourself off in the deep end, bro. You're doing 15 to 20 rep back squats. Those are gross. Like those are nasty. Just because if you guys have never done that before, like a 15 to 20 rep back squat, the amount that it requires, just think about if you were to step away from the rack, you unrack your weight. Before you even done a squat, just think about the amount of time that the weight's on your back for the whole set. Not even doing a squat, right? Like if you were just to stand there for the duration it takes you to do 15 or 20 reps, let alone push yourself to do a set of 15 to 20. Like, bro, you really threw yourself off the deep end. That's funny. No wonder you felt like that. Shit.
Well, legs too. Like I don't think a lot of people get this unless if you've really pushed yourself in legs. You have a lot more in the tank than you think you do, especially like squats. The last set of those, this is why I almost puked, is because I got to like 9 reps and I pushed to 16. So like I got to 9 and I wanted to stop, but I pushed like single rep up to 16 reps. And so that was like, but that just kind of goes to show like you have a lot more like failure in squats or failure in leg press or failure in any sort of leg exercise is a lot deeper than people understand. Because like burning is not, you're not done, right? Like you're going to burn for a while before you still have, like, your legs are strong generally.
Yeah.
Like as far as, they even walking around, you build strength. Like even just
Right.
walking around, like doing some, walking around in Arizona, there's a lot of hills. So like you can build some good leg strength, even just walking some hills. But it's a good and bad feeling, the 15 to 20. Like it's like, I think that I did a Instagram story today because I almost puked today too. Today was another one where I did reverse lunges, but I didn't, like, I don't think it's even feasible to do 15 to 20 reps of reverse lunges. I think that's stupid personally. So I did 12. Like my thing is, like, with reverse lunges, like alternating, like 12 reps each leg that's basically 20. Like that's
Brutal.
in my eyes. Like it's very, very difficult. And so those,
Yeah.
like that coupled with the RDLs probably did me in with the reason why I almost puked today as well. But I think that's like that adjustment period. It's such a shock to the body to do that many reps that I think it's going to take me just another maybe week, and then I'll be back into the game with the
Yeah, it's
stamina.
gross, dude. If nobody's ever done that before, they haven't taken themselves through that. That's why I always say, like, if I were to pick one movement for the rest of my life, it would be the back squat, just because of how demanding on the body it is, how much you get from it. Like, we're talking about the physical side of things, but you touched on it briefly too. You're like, dude, I got to 9. And then from there, I took it into singles from a mental standpoint, and I was able to knock out 16. So, like, it'll take you to a position where you're like, everything in you is telling you to put that bar back, put it down, rack it, be done. It's okay to rest. You got that inner critic on your shoulder, right? It's like you're looking for every way to cop out. But then there's that other side of you that's just like, just one more, just do one more rep. And before you know it, like, you finished a set of 16, right? And it's just like, that's why I love people that lift weights and they do so on a consistent basis and they take themselves beyond that comfort zone, because it's almost like you can relate to people like that better. You can almost share the same language. You guys share the same experiences. You can, like, you explained that and you were talking in verbiage, but I could bring up and elicit exactly what that feels like and what you were going through. Right. And people who haven't done that, it's very hard for them to grasp that. And so there's a different level of respect there, meaning, like, I know exactly what he's talking about right now. People who haven't, it's not a knock or a bash against people who haven't tried that or done that. But what I'm saying is, when you're like, dude, I felt like putting it down at 9, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then mentally, you have to take yourself to a place where, like, okay, let me just take this one at a time. Like, and then before you know it, 10, okay, man, I was able to do that one. Let me try to do another one. 11, okay, I made it up. Like, let me brace myself a little bit. It's getting tougher. Like, 12, right? And you're just chipping, like, literally one at a time, trying to be a little bit better at each one of those repetitions. And then before you know it, like, you're well beyond that 9th rep that you were once at. So it's super cool, man.
Oh man, it's tough, and I think that for people out there as well, like for me, I'm assuming maybe you're the same way. Like when I'm really pushing it, which is why it's so nice to be doing that again. It just, the rest of the day is really good because I do my
Yeah.
workouts in the morning, and it's after, I'm not telling people don't push to the point of puking. Like that's not a,
No.
don't do
Yeah.
that, right? Like, but you might, if you start pushing, you might find yourself getting to those points early on. I think,
Yeah.
when you really start pushing, if you've never done it before, or if you don't, probably if you're going to start pushing and doing more intense workouts and like pushing the envelope, really trying to go closer to failure, then you're going to find that you might get close to that, especially with leg exercises. I don't know if anybody's puked from non-leg exercises. Obviously cardio you could puke from probably, but I think it's more or less legs and cardio from me that I've gotten close to or puked from.
Yeah, it's just anything like overexerting your body too. And when you do it, and we're not saying like you have to push to puke every single time you do, but just challenging yourself. Like today, that was your challenge, right? Like, but taking yourself in, I'm a huge fan of doing that stuff early and often. Like, make it the first thing you do in the day, because then to your point and what you mentioned, you're like, dude, the rest of the day, I felt great. Like physically, you'll feel beat up, but like, you're like, I tackled like my toughest thing physically in the beginning of the day. you're going to go about the rest of your day feeling like you can handle anything. You're like, dude, everything's downhill from here, right? Like I took on the monster. I slayed the dragon first thing in the morning. And then, so now the rest of my day, it's almost like cruise control. You're like, dude, I can take that meeting, or I can handle those emails, or I could, like everything else is just like nothing, so it's versus when you're in a rut and you don't have that challenging experience. And then the day to day, minute, like little small details that seem like a headache all of a sudden seem like you're climbing uphill at them because you haven't been doing the physical side of things to start your day off. So yeah, of course, those people that don't consistently or continuously work out and don't do that physically demanding thing to start off their day are going to have a much tougher, generally speaking, uphill battle with just general, like everyday small little challenges that'll seem super daunting. When you don't start your day off with something challenging. And so that's why I'm a huge fan of morning workouts, dude. That's why I personally do it. So I can eat the frog first, right? Like, get that thing over with. It's not looming and weighing over your head of like, oh man, I hope I have time later to get it. And then like, here come requests from your boss that you weren't expecting when you were trying to be off at work. And like now all of a sudden you quote unquote can't do your workout, right? And like, so you're like pushing it around and it becomes this thing of, it's no longer this priority for you anymore. It's getting pushed and dictated by everything else that's going on. And so you're extremely reactive. And so I tell my clients that have trouble with that, I have no problem with people working out in the afternoon. If you can do it, great, but you need to set it as a non-negotiable for yourself. Like, and the people who struggle with it and try to do it later in the afternoon, I actually shift them to the mornings and say, hey, you got to do it first thing in the morning, get it over with, get it done with, feel accomplished, get that huge win on the first half of the day, or first start of the day, and the rest of your day is going to be phenomenal. Right? It's all uphill from there, or just downhill, cruise control.
We were doing something challenging first thing in the morning. I actually used to, this is a long time ago. I've worked out in the morning for a while now, but this was probably 7 years ago that I was working out like after work. And I always found that my workouts were half-assed because I was mentally drained, maybe physically drained. Like it's just, you're tired, and I would not get much of a workout in. I found myself like cutting them short, skipping them sometimes, and, being like, this is like, it's not even worth it. Like I don't have any energy, like all that bullshit. It's just so much, you have so much more excuses at that point in the day. I think like for the first thing, if you do it first thing in the morning, like that energy boost, like walking out of the gym feeling accomplished, and just having a little pump, or like, just like, God, I did something hard. I did something challenging, sets the stage, and just you hit the ground running when you start work that day.
For sure. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be like a super grueling workout, right? But it can be something where you can push yourself and just give it what you got for that particular day and prove to yourself that you've developed this mentality of no matter what. And I think people overlook, or try to like make it so complex as far as their workouts. And yes, the nuances of the workout are, and the specifics of it are important, but the fact that you just keep showing up for yourself every single day, regardless of what your workout is, it's just building that habit and that callus of every single day, or whatever your scheduled workout days are, during the week, that you show up no matter what. And when you do that, by default, the byproduct, I mean, this trickles into a lot of stuff, but by default, from a health and fitness standpoint, you will achieve those results that you've always desired, because you're not showing up when you just feel good. You're not showing up when your schedule just allows you to. Like if we did that, like in a month's time frame, if you're looking at like a 30-day time frame, and we just showed up where our schedule allowed us to, or when all the stars aligned and I felt good to show up and I wanted to work out. Like if I just showed up for those scenarios in a 30-day time frame, that would probably be, I'd maybe get 2 to 5 workouts in at most, right? Like when that should be my weekly base, what I get in a week, right? So let's say 5 to 6 days across 4 weeks, right? You're looking at 25, 30 workouts versus 2 to 5, because I'm doing it based on the outcome of the workout, and whether I complete it or not is dictated based on how my day is going, right? And that's where I think a lot of people are at. People buy a gym membership and they're like, oh yeah, I plan to go after work today. And all of a sudden work gets extended, or the kid's ride that was once going to pick them up. Now you have to go pick them up. Right? And all these things happen. All these trickle effects happen versus put it in a time slot that's non-negotiable for you. And you start to move other things around that time slot. That's why I'm a big fan of doing it in the morning. Like get your workout done before people even have access to you. Is it the only way to do it? No, for years I trained at noon to 1. And then I've also trained 4:30, 5:30 and later too. So I've just found out of training all those times, for me, the way that I got it done most consistently was first thing in the morning.
Yeah. And basically that's what the person watching or listening to this has asked themselves, right? Like, when can you most consistently do these workouts?
Yeah.
And, be honest with yourself as you go through it. Like, pick a time. If it's afternoon, like, cool, right? Start with that. But if you find that like you're setting 3 workouts a week and you're only getting 1 or 2 over the course of a month or a few weeks or whatever, then you probably got to shift that time around, find a better spot. Cause that's just like, it's not acceptable for you, right? I think that that's just one thing where if you're telling yourself you're going to do this amount of workouts and you're constantly falling short, something's up. And one thing when you were talking, I thought of, with the motivation around workouts, right? We've talked about motivation a million times on this podcast, but and it's not always going to be there. But what's helped me be more motivated going into the gym is over the years tracking my workouts and almost making it a competition where I'm excited to try to beat that previous week's best, right? Or like if you're in a program and you're trying to progress, you're trying to progress the weight or reps or whatever every week, right? It's like you're trying to progress in some way. Like, I love that competition with myself of like seeing how much more weight can I do this week? How many more reps can I get this week on the same exercise? That competition just lights a fire up inside of me. And so I think that makes the workouts more fun, and it adds that motivation where I found even just this last week of starting to do that again, like that's like, oh, it's awesome. Like writing that number down and like knowing that next week I'm going to be able to go in and like try to beat that. And just really, me and you are both really competitive people. And so wherever you can kind of find that, or whatever works for you, right? Like whatever works for you to increase that motivation to get you to the gym, to help you push a little bit harder, like throw that shit in there. But I think that definitely, like if you want to get the most out of your workouts, use your notes app, use something, use a journal, whatever you got to do, write down your weights and sets and reps every week. And just see how you can get a little bit better, how you can add 1 rep, how you can add a set, how you can add, like 5 pounds, 2.5 pounds, whatever it may be to that. It's going to just, that's one of the big things about working out. You see, we've talked about this before, the person who you see in the gym who's doing the same weight on bench for the last 5 years, really not helping at all, right? Like you're not really seeing much doing that. It's like the person, it's kind of like the person who just always is on like the treadmill or always is on the stair stepper or whatever. Like you're just maintaining what you have. You're not getting any better. You're not challenging yourself in any sort of respect. Like, I don't think you're getting too much out of those workouts. And so I've always found, and I'm just that, like, I'm super duper competitive with that. Like, I want to just get better. And I want to just push that weight. I want to see how much I can do, how strong I can get, like all that shit. But what's going on with you, brother? Like, how have you been?
Good, man. I'm finishing up a cycle right now for my workout program, and same thing. Like, and I'll tell you right now, like data gives us that sense of accomplishment. When you have something to track and you have something to go off of and compare yourself to what I did the previous week, to what I did 3 weeks ago. And I'm like looking at this progression, right? Whether it's repetitions, whether it's loading, sometimes it'll be the same rep and same loading, but maybe I was able to move a little bit better, right? Like, I mean, you can get granular with it. When you start to do it for a long period of time, you need to look for those granular wins, those smaller wins that are in between, because those are the things that keep you going. At first, when you're first starting, like you'll progress in a linear fashion, like because you get all the newbie gains, right? Like your weights will keep going up every single week. Your body's adapting really quick. And a lot of that just comes down to motor development, meaning like you're actually getting better at the positioning and the actual pattern of the movement. And you're progressing in that fashion. It's not always that you're putting on and packing on muscle when you first start. You will build muscle over time, but a lot of those huge massive like PRs that you have when you first start, I encourage people always to find the wins in between those. Like those are great, but like did you move better? Did you move well? Did the set that you did the previous week, even though you did it at the same weight, were you able to make it feel a little bit easier today because your mechanics were a little bit more dialed in, or you were focused on your breathing, and so your bracing was a little bit better, which made in turn the weight move a little bit more seamlessly. Like those little things are the things that are going to build the foundation so that you can keep doing this for a long period of time versus just like, oh shit, how much weight can I lift? Is it more than last week? No. All right, fuck, I failed. Right? That's a very short, like narrow road. Now, when you are riding that high and you can take those big leaps and those progressions where you're like, yes, my weight was better than the previous week, which was better than the last one, etc. Ride that wave because that's a fun wave to ride. But now what I'm saying is just don't get discouraged when you don't see it, because strength oftentimes doesn't just go in this beautiful, like linear fashion. And so being able to like focus on the little tangibles in between is super important, man. So, but yeah, man, that's what I'm focused on right now. I'm actually coming up on a deload week next week, so I'm excited about that. I also just completed my 16 weeks of testing my program. So I usually do that 1 to 2 times a year. And that was really fun, man. And I will say this is the easiest time I've ever had to diet. And I say that because every time I go through, I reiterate, I tweak, I make adjustments and go, how could I make this not only more seamless for myself, but clients that come through my program? Like, how can I make it easier for them? And I'll tell you the biggest difference after going through those 16 weeks this time was my phase 1, or my preseason phase is what I like to call it, because I use sports terminology, just like a annual season with a professional sports team. Is I stayed in my preseason this time for 5.5, almost 6 months. And so I boosted the hell out of my calories, focused on getting stronger, almost completely neglected the scale. I didn't step on the scale until I literally started my program. So before the 16 weeks, I spent 5.5, 6 months seeing how much food I can eat while just feeling good, feeling higher energy levels, making sure I was sleeping well, making sure I was hitting my protein targets, making sure the increase in calories was very gradual. And I was just trying to really see how much I could eat without overdoing it and feeling like super fat, bloated, and puffy. Like I was trying to avoid that feeling. And man, I'll tell you what, by the time I started week 1 and dove into phase 2 or in season, it was seamless from there. Because now when I went into a caloric deficit and I cut my calories and the goal was to lose body fat, I was able to cut to a number at which I used to just regularly maintain at. So my total caloric intake was way higher than it normally was, put myself in a deficit. My metabolism was really fast. I was able to go into that in-season phase and it felt like really, really easy. And so that's something that I'm going to take with me going forward and be like, okay, I want to do that every time. I want it to feel like that every time, because I've gone just from what I'm currently eating now and then just going immediately into a deficit. I can do it, but it's a lot more like scratching and clawing and battling cravings. And I had very little to, if any of that during this last time I tested the program. So that was really cool. Now I finished, and I'll make a whole series on this too. And the most important part of the diet now is I'm going to get out of where I'm currently at, but I'm going to do it in a progressive fashion, right? So I'm going to reverse out of here very slow, very gradually, increase my calories back up, speed my metabolism back up. But yeah, man, as far as the in-season phase 2 part of it, the whole 16 weeks, like it's probably the easiest dieting that I've ever done. It was really seamless, dude. So
I love it, dude.
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome. And that's so huge. And that's something like that first phase, that preseason, and then that postseason where you're building back up calories now are two of the biggest things that people get wrong, right? And two of the biggest reasons why people are unsuccessful is that they don't set themselves up for fat loss, and then they don't know how to get out of it. So like a lot of people just kind of go back to eating what they have been, and they gain a lot of the weight back because they, go from eating a low amount to a higher amount. Or at the start, they're just eating such a low amount of calories that a calorie deficit is just terrible or impossible to achieve. Miserable. Because you're going to be eating, peanuts, like just eating nothing throughout the day. It's like celery and carrots or whatever. Like you're just going to eat bullshit throughout the day. Like, not that that's bull. It's good shit. You should eat some of it, but not like that's not what you should just be eating throughout the day.
Right.
But I also I had a thought when you were talking about that too, is, people, when we kind of go back to the previous topic of of lifting, right? And seeing gains and progressively overloading. The food aspect is such a huge reason why you can continue doing that.
Mm,
If you're eating in a
yep.
calorie deficit, it's pretty unrealistic to expect, unless if you're newer to these exercises or whatever, that you're probably not going to see these huge gains on a regular basis, right? But if you are eating more, maybe you're eating at maintenance, you're eating in a surplus, then you can expect those bigger gains in the gym, the bigger strength gains, the bigger weight gains, like all that stuff, more muscle, all that shit. And so I think that's a huge thing just to mention for anybody out there. If you're like, if you're wondering why you're not seeing gains in the gym, look at your calories, look at what you're eating, because that's probably where it's at, one of the big
Yeah.
reasons why. Or like you said as well, you've just been doing it for a long time, and those things come a lot slower when you've been doing it for a long time, which is why we like to periodize and try to build muscle throughout the year and try to do these different things so that we can gain strength, gain muscle, increase our amount of calories that we're eating at maintenance. So I think that's awesome. And one thing I wanted to bring up.
I think it's, go ahead.
Oh, no, keep going. I got a different topic. So like it's you just, if you got a thought on this.
I was just going to add to that, like the simplest thing, or one of the coolest things is when you see people that grasp the concept of eating more before they start is going to be extremely beneficial. And the faster somebody can adapt and buy into that, understanding a little bit longer of a game here, extend your time horizon. Don't just be so focused on like, I know that you've been taught and you see that losing weight and doing it fast is like the sexy thing to do. And it's like the thing that you anticipate and want to do the most. And you're like, I just want to get results now. If you can pump the brakes on that and do it in a way that, and ask yourself, do I want this more sustainable or do I want it fast? Because those are two things on the opposite side of the spectrum. You got to pick which one you want. The downside with doing it fast, or excuse me, the upside is obviously you lose it fast. The downside is there's a lot of downsides, but some of the obvious ones are you're also losing lean body mass in the process. So not all the weight that you're losing is just body fat. When you lose it quickly, you're sacrificing muscle tissue, lean body mass, the stuff that we actually want to keep. So congratulations, the scale moves faster, but at the sacrifice of losing your most expensive tissue that you have on your body, the hardest tissue to keep. So I would just encourage people, the ones that grasp the concept of, okay, I'll do some legwork up front here in the preseason, and I'll buy into the process of gradually increasing my calories to boost my metabolism and put myself in a really, really healthy position to then go into an in-season or a caloric deficit. I promise you, you will thank yourself. Your body will thank yourself, and you'll be able to respond a lot better for the long haul. And then, of course, having an exit plan, getting out of there and doing that properly too. But I think people are so quick to jump into in-season or phase 2 or a caloric deficit that they do no prep work, nor do they have an exit strategy. So they just crash and burn. And it's the reason why people keep losing and regaining the 20, 30, 40 pounds over and over and over. It's like, how many times have you lost that 20, 30, 40 pounds and then gained it back, right? Like, how many times are you going to keep doing that? So once somebody gets fed up enough and they go, oh, okay, there's an actual strategy and a legitimate long-term sustainable process here, I encourage everybody to try it that way, because it'll probably be the last time that you'll ever have to do anything crazy like what you've been doing before.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's a misconception in the industry too, is like when you lose weight, you're not losing body fat. Like you're losing a mix of water, fat, and muscle, right? Like and we did a podcast episode that we were never able to drop just because it was, the audio and stuff was kind of messed up. But we did that on body comp with Will. And we'll have to try to get him back on, because I think that's something we haven't really talked a lot about, is that body composition that a lot of people don't understand. You think like, you see stuff out there where somebody's like, oh, I lost 5 pounds of fat this week, right? You're not going to lose 5 pounds of fat in a week. Like a lot of that is muscle. There's probably a lot of water in there, right? Like there might be a little bit of body fat. And that's kind of a huge thing for people to understand, is like, that's why we talk about sustainability with fat loss. And that's why we both preach that within our programs, like is because it's so much more enjoyable. And like two, like you're actually losing more body fat. Like you're holding on to that the lean tissue, the lean muscle that's actually linked to longer living, that's linked to more maintenance calories, that's linked to more energy, that's linked to all of these amazing benefits. We want to keep that as much as we possibly can, because it's super easy to lose it. You throw yourself in this drastic calorie deficit for a period of time, you can lose a fuckload of muscle and change your life in a really bad way. It takes a long time to put that baby on. Like it takes a year, like over a year, you probably can put on what, like 5 to 10 pounds of muscle. Like and that's if you've been doing it for a little while. Obviously, somebody who's been probably is new to it could put on a lot more muscle in that period of time. But like if you've been doing this for a little while, it takes a while to put on that fucking muscle.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Long time. That's why I say it's expensive tissue, right? It's hard to sustain. You got to make sure you have adequate protein. You got to make sure you're consistently adding the stimulus to be able to keep that muscle so it continues to keep adapting so you don't just lose it. And guess what? We don't have our age working with us by any means either, right? So as we get older, we also start, the likelihood of us losing that tissue starts to increase each and every single day, right? Exponentially. So that's why I say, like, if you are so concerned with going into a deficit and just crashing your calories and just going as low as possible, understand you're losing the lean body mass, you're losing the lean tissue. And like Alex just said, all that stuff you work extremely hard for to gain, that takes a really long time. You just lost it, and now you have to try to regain it, and you have to start the process all over again. And so many people are in that boat. I feel terrible for them to have to keep going through that same cycle. So yeah, there's a better way. Just know there's a better way. That's for sure.
And it's like on the muscle side, it's really easy to lose muscle. It's really hard to gain muscle. On like the weight side, it's really easy to gain weight. It's not as easy to lose weight in a sustainable way, right? And that's kind of something I've been thinking about is recently I told you this, like I got to the level of fat that is tolerable for me, right? Like I got to this level of just this, I felt like complete dog shit. And I got to this level, and it made me realize, was like, most people, I shouldn't say most, because there's a lot of obese people out there. There's a lot of people that are very overweight, but like, which they maybe don't have this threshold. But I know for me, I have this like this level that's like, okay, right? It's like, and once I see a certain thing in the mirror, or I feel a certain way, it's like this rock bottom for me. Mm-hmm. It's almost like that rock bottom of body composition and energy and whatever. And I hit it. And it was just like that. It was that interesting thing where, it's that cool thing for me where it's like, I have this threshold, but not everybody has that threshold, right? Because I think that's good. Like I've always had that where I've talked about my addiction over, with alcohol, and how like I had almost like an addiction to my body, an addiction to alcohol at the same time. And so like I would drink and a food, right? It was almost like a food and an alcohol addiction that like I would binge eat and binge drink over the course of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, gain a lot of weight over the course of that period of time because I was just consuming calories. Obviously, alcohol, we're going to do an episode on that very soon. You can look for that probably in about 2 weeks from this date. We'll have an alcohol episode that drops because we haven't talked about that on this podcast since probably the start with Nick and myself. But it's like that type of thing, like the body addiction of seeing a certain thing with my body, of being addicted to the gym, led me to do like drastic shit throughout the week, which I don't recommend for anybody, but that kept me in what looked to be pretty good shape, right? Like that kept me from getting like off the rails, which can happen if somebody has an alcohol addiction, if somebody is binging on food and they don't have that side of it, right? So I'm actually kind of grateful that I had that, and that I had this thought. So as you know, I like to change direction sometimes. I was actually talking to somebody in the sauna a few weeks ago, and I had this thought because I still have like body dysmorphia type shit, right? Like where it's like I've always kind of had it. I think there's always going to be a titch of it there, but I thought of that there's a benefit of having a titch of it there, right? I think that threshold is because of that. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to say that people should have body dysmorphia. It's terrible, right? But I think that like the fact that I have a titch of it helps me from getting too crazy off the rails with stuff. Does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. It's anytime you go into extremes on one thing, it's usually not beneficial, right? So if you have body dysmorphia, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what you're saying is like you're using it to your advantage to have those own insecurities about how you look, how you feel. You're using it in the back of your head. You're not putting it at the forefront. Like, let this thing run my life. But it almost sets this alarm off you to when you pass this certain threshold, it kicks in and says, hey, enough's enough. Like we probably need to do something here. And so that's a perfect example of how you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah.
It's just like when people say like selfish, right? It's all in context, right? Like if somebody says that you're selfish, well, it's like, well, you can use your ability to be selfish, to prioritize you, to in turn make you a better person to show up for everybody else, right? And so it's like how you interpret it, how you choose to use it. If you just connotate it with something as negative, that's what you'll think is it's just like, oh, it's only negative if I do something that's associated with that. When it's like, well, there's a lot of different degrees along that spectrum. It's never this binary black and white thing. It's to what degree and what degree do I choose to use it in? Can I use it as leverage and actually use some of these things that are quote unquote bad or negative to my advantage to actually yield a positive outcome? And I totally believe that we can.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even think there was any advantages to it till recently. I was like, this is like all bad. Like I always thought it was all bad. It's like that I look at myself in the mirror and like I'm probably, even in some of my best times, like where I didn't feel good. Right. Like, and I think that a lot of that comes down to mindset, in my opinion, like with that body dysmorphia, just body, kind of looking at yourself and just being like, fuck. Like it's just a lot of mindset stuff. But I just realized, I was like, wow, there's actually an advantage to it. There might not be a lot, but like if you can see that advantage, then it's like, okay, like having this, embracing it a little bit more, like not being happy about it, but like just being like, you know what, like I can learn to love myself a little bit more. Like this, like the fact that I have this helps me out in some respect. Like it does allow me to not get to the point where some people get, right? Like that obese, like some of these people, like they're at the point where it's very, like they're potentially on their deathbed, right? Like they're very, like they're inside, like they're not, things aren't going good, right? Their health issues become like a lot of health issues can come up from being overweight, obese, like the more you kind of go that route, diabetes, other diseases, stuff like that. And so, the fact that, I have this little titch of dysmorphia, I think is just like something that I think maybe can help people out there who have it. Like it could just see a little bit of that silver lining within it. I don't want anybody to say like, oh, like I'm happy I have body dysmorphia. Like if you do, like make sure you go and reach out to somebody and get help with that. Cause it's not fun. It's not great. Like constantly picking yourself apart in the mirror, but I want people to understand that it might be, there could be a benefit to it. Like I think, like I've just been thinking a lot more about these things. And another thing that I talked to you briefly about was the discipline thing that we were talking about, where it was like, and this is like a sign, like you guys are seeing a sign that my brain is finally working for the first time in a fucking month, is that I'm finally having these like thoughts and like dissecting things a little bit more. And so I think that my brain is finally like coming back, rebooting and deciding that it's going to be clear. But the discipline thing. So I've always considered myself like a disciplined person, always strived to be like super disciplined. At points, I was like, how disciplined can I become? Right. And I think that I've always thought it was all good. And recently I've questioned discipline a little bit because that's kind of all the rave, especially within self-development within that industry. And I'm not saying that that's bad. Like it's really, really good to be disciplined. But I got to this point where I got almost put so much pressure on myself from discipline, where I had all of these numbers where it was like, you got to do this for 30 minutes, this for an hour, this for an hour and a half, this for 25 minutes. And it became like pressure to be disciplined. I was like, oh, I got to do all these things or I'm a failure, right? Or the day is a failure. When it's just like how, at what point does discipline turn into too much pressure for somebody? And like, my question to you is like, do you think that there's just certain people who reach that point, who are just maybe predisposed to that, or they just already put so much pressure on themselves, like myself, that it just kind of reaches that level? Or do you think that it's just kind of, there's all good to it?
I think everybody has their own capacity, and it's different for everybody. So I think there's going to be people that could be so disciplined and regimented longer than others. So on the surface, it may look like they have the ability to extend themselves a lot further. And so it makes it look like, oh, that person can do it without spilling over or hitting their capacity. But I think at some point, they eventually hit their capacity, because everybody has their own, whether they say it or not, right? We always have that. You only have so much patience. Like if that little kid or your son or daughter keeps nagging and yelling and like is super loud, like eventually you're going to hit your spilling point. So I think us as humans, we all have that tipping point or our capacity point. I think what it really comes down to is how much control do you have around self-awareness to realize when too much is too much, meaning like you're just forcing yourself to do certain things. And I think that you and I talked about this too, but this is one of the hardest things to do. But being able to step outside of yourself and coach yourself is an art, is a skill, takes practice, takes repetitions. Us being obviously both coaches, it's very easy for us to look at somebody else's situation and to tell if somebody's being over disciplined or stressing out, or I like to call it majoring in the minors, where every single little detail, if they miss it, they're super upset with themselves. That tends to be people who are very data driven, like very analytical. They're great with numbers, and any little fluctuation or thing that's off, it upsets them and they get really tough on themselves. Very similar to where you were like, man, I was meditating for 1 hour. I was doing like all these things very specific. So then my morning routine got super stretched out and I felt like I had to like keep doing and keep up with this thing. It's really, really easy for myself to look at somebody else that I'm coaching and be like, okay, yeah, you're being pushed to your capacity right here. It's actually doing more detriment than it is beneficial. So let's let off the throttle a little bit. And it's easy for me to make that judgment, that call for that person in the moment. Now the challenge is being able to do it with yourself. So when you're in the moment and you have the blinders on and you're like, yeah, but I'm staying super disciplined because I know where these things are going to get me. And so I have to complete XYZ every single morning before I even start my day. And like you start to dig yourself down this rabbit hole. And before you know it, you're just like, man, this sucks. Like you start questioning it. You're like, why am I doing this again? You start to lose doubt. And then when you don't do it, you feel like you're taking a hit to your self-confidence and belief in yourself, and you feel like you're failing, and right. And it's just like this uphill battle for you. So I think the self-awareness around it is super key. And one thing that I found that's super powerful is have the ability to take a step outside of yourself. Or what would you tell, or what would you coach somebody who's going through the same exact scenario? What would your advice be to them? And then 9 times out of 10, you're going to have those answers for you. And it'll be a lot more clear versus being in the moment. Sometimes it's really hard to see, man. What are your thoughts?
Oh, dude. And it's almost like self-love, right? It's super
Yeah.
easy to be like kind and to like kind of help others people see like, oh, where they're being too hard on themselves, right? It's like, oh, like, hey, like just let yourself. I honestly do this. So like I do it really good with other people, where it's like, I kind of like coaching, and it's like basically coaching, right? It's like being able to point things out, being able to like help somebody realize that something isn't as big of a deal as maybe they're making it seem. But then for ourselves, like we're super hard on ourselves, and every little
Yep.
thing gets like just nitpicked, right? And we're just like harsh, and we just say shit that we'd probably punch that person in the face if like somebody else actually said it to us, but we say it to ourselves on a regular basis. So I think that's so true. Just that self-awareness. And what I've realized though with this is that the discipline aspect of it, I think it's so good to be disciplined and to have structure, right? I think that structure is key, but it's just the numbers and stuff. I've realized that there's probably got to be some sort of numbers for things. But for me, what I've tried, I'm just honestly trying this. Like I'm just doing a trial period of this and just doing like not setting numbers on things and just being like, I'm going to do it. And what I've noticed through like 7 days of doing that is that I still do like what I was doing, right? Like I still get a great workout in, even though I don't put a number on how long it has to be. I still get reading in, and I still like, put good things into my brain, even though I don't have a number on how long it has to be. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes. Like I still get a meditation in at some point, even though it doesn't have to be an hour. It just has to be a meditation. Like there's these things, and it's just kind of led me to be less stressed, which has allowed me to enjoy life more. And one other thing I've realized is like I had this like epiphany on my walk yesterday where I was like, this isn't enjoyable anymore. I was like, I used to see the benefits from this. Like I used to see the benefits, but I got so tied into even the numbers of it. Like even I still had numbers on my walks until like the other day, until like yesterday. And actually today, I was like yesterday, like I had like still had like I have to have 45 minutes of walks. I have to have 45 minutes of walks. And I was still at least, that's generally going to happen anyway because I got to get the little one here, Coco, on her walks. But I just wasn't enjoying it. It was like a task. It was like something I had to check off the list. It was not a stress reliever anymore. It was honestly causing more stress because I was like, oh, we got to go. Like we don't have time to waste here. We got to get this walk in. We don't have time, blah, 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 as opposed to like letting my thoughts go, as opposed to, getting out of my own head, as opposed to breathing, as opposed to taking in the nature and scenery around me, which is even more beautiful, like just than I've ever seen on my walks. Because obviously going from Minnesota, now I have all the mountains around me and I'm walking in the mountains and like it's cool to see, but I haven't been enjoying it as much just because I've been so tied to this number and so tied to getting this done. So I've been trying to like I've kind of realized that was sometimes too, like where that took a while to get there, but eventually over the course of being so disciplined with it, like I think that it just got to this point where I kind of lost sight of why I was doing the walks in the first
Mm-hmm.
place. And it started to become this stressful activity for me, which should not be the case for walks, right? Like or for meditation or for like anything to be stressful where you're like asking yourself, oh, well, I only have 30 minutes. Like what is this? Blah, 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 blah. Like these things like should be these self-care things, like should be stuff that like actually is self-care. And so that's kind of what I realized is like at this point, it became something that was no longer serving me. And so I had to start shifting my mind, or I've had to start shifting my mindset around it back to finding those benefits again. Like, hey, like, let's just take our time. It doesn't have to be like this lightning speed walk. I'd rather have it be a slower walk and just actually take in the scenery and really breathe and actually feel good after it, as opposed to like feeling more stressed after it.
I think yeah, that's great. I think we turn our disciplines into have tos versus remembering that we get to do this. And when we
Yes,
get
yes.
to do it, it's a different mindset than like, oh man, I have to or I have to walk 45 minutes, or I have to do this long meditation, or I have to hit some arbitrary number versus going, what's the reason that I first started to do these things to begin with? And when I can remember that reason as to why, it gives purpose back to those things again. And then you can almost forget, like to your point, oh, I don't have to like book it and walk super fast on my walk. Let's actually, the reason I started these walks was to kind of stay grounded, get outside, get some sunlight, get my mind right, get some fresh air. For you walking Coco, like those are the things that probably initially got that ignite to go and do the walk. And then you found yourself doing it so many days where you're like, damn, I'm just doing it just to do it now. And we all do that with things. It's like we get so zoomed in, we're in the weeds, we got our blinders on, we're doing the thing because we're staying disciplined, right? But remembering as to why we're doing it, because if you ask yourself, like, what is the reason I'm doing this? And it brings up the initial reason, or at least some sort of reason. It'll give it purpose and meaning as to why again, versus you like, oh, I have to do this. And anytime you find yourself in that scenario of I have to do this, that's a good signal. That's a good like alarm that should go off in your head and go, why do I get to do this? Right? What is the reason I get to do this? Why am I must have started it in the first place. And if you can think of those things, it just gives it more purpose. It gives it more progression. It gives it more meaning. It'll kind of give you like an aha moment, like, oh yeah, I remember why now, versus just something that you start to at once you loved and then you start to begin to hate, or it feels like a chore, or it feels like this, it's just like a nuisance. So
Oh man, yeah, it's crazy. It's when you get into the place of being able to like, that's why I'm just so grateful that I've gotten back into a spot where my mind's going clearly. Is it's fun going through the day and like having ideas come again and having like these thoughts and like questioning things. Like I've never questioned discipline before, right? Like I've always just thought like everybody talks about it, right? Discipline over motivation, all that stuff, and I think there's a lot to it, but like I've never questioned like the bad side of it, right? Like that kind of almost the extreme side of it, right? Where you can kind of get to this point and everybody's different. So I just realized I got to set something up and really that's why I think it's important for people to try different shit. Like that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying not having numbers on shit and seeing if it works for me. And there's going to be other stuff. That's why there's like not every diet works for everybody, right? Like people try keto and intermittent fasting and whatever, and like so it works wonders for somebody, and then for the next person it's terrible. It's like intermittent fasting is terrible for me. one, I have to eat a lot of calories. Two, I'm hungry right away in the morning. Like there's a lot of things that go against it for me, right? Like if we can kind of figure out how our brain works, how our body works, and we can start really eating in a way and thinking in a way and, setting up habits in a way that really like move with the current as opposed to going against the current, I think it really sets us up for more enjoyment. And that's what I'm really trying to get at is like, how can I really just like go through the day and enjoy what I'm doing? Find the good in all of the things and find the benefit in all of the things and not be as stressed, because it shouldn't be like, we shouldn't be like that stressed going throughout the day. But sometimes life happens and then you fast forward 2 months and you're like, holy shit, like what happened? Right. Like, and like you kind of catch yourself and it's like, oh wow, I got to change some stuff. Like, let's get this life set up a little bit better so that I can like really have fun here and do what we're supposed to be doing. Like it's short, like we're not going to be here forever. So like, let's have fun while we're here.
Yeah, dude. And I could definitely tell it's a huge difference when you're operating at your normal, like and I could tell that and we all do it, right? We all go through these ruts to see you coming out on the other side of it right now is super cool. You got a different vibrant going on with it right now. You can tell like things are firing on all cylinders for you right now. You're getting your groove back. Not to say that you weren't before, but your energy levels are different, right? I could tell.
And I mean, you look at a video, if you look at the podcast when we were talking about my struggles, if you put that guy next to this guy, like that was a different guys. Like, you're going to be able to see the difference. Yeah. Like if you're really curious, go watch the episode where I have the TCU purple shirt on, and you're going to see how different that I am right now as opposed to that day.
Yeah, man. And that's all part of it, right? We all have the ebbs and flows, but for you to still show up on those, that's a good example of that too. Like what we were talking about before with the workouts. It's like, dude, you showed up, whatever it took, right? And you did take time for yourself to recoup and get right mentally. And man, it's like night and day difference. But I think the cool thing is you continued to show up for yourself, man, no matter what. So awesome stuff today, man. I hope people got some value out of this.
This is fun, man. I love, God, feels good to come on here and talk with you. And like, these are some of my favorite episodes, is these ones where we don't really have necessarily a script. Like I had a few things, like a few topics written down. Like I said, like I had a few topics that we ended up getting to, but it was just, these are fun where it's just, we go where we go and we just talk, and we could do these for hours. Obviously, I think we could sit here and do a whole 3 to 4 hour pod just talking about life and random shit. And we tend to, when we meet during the week, talk for a long period of time. Like yesterday, we actually had a Zoom where we went for like what, hour and a half, I think, that we were just kind of rocking and rolling. And that's why this works so well, I think. It's just because we can kind of just go back and forth all day.
Yeah. It's great stuff, man. And if any of you guys got value from it, all we ask is for you to like and share it with somebody who you feel like could benefit from it.
Hell yeah. Appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoyed this. We appreciate you watching and listening every week. Hope you have a good rest of the day, good rest of the week, and we'll be talking to you soon.